What we got ourselves here is going to be a good old-fashioned tier list. And so for those that don't know, our tier lists have absolutely no opinions based on the placing of the gods, because then the tier list doesn't matter, because who cares about what random people's opinions are. So our tier list is entirely based on the data that we've acquired from the month within the Smite Twitchy League. I do believe we had 500 to 600 games played in December. So we actually have a huge sample size for this data. So that's very good. Obviously, the more games played, the more accurate the data gets, because you just have more data. So we actually have a ton of games played. We have some really, really good data points for this month. And so all of this data comes from the Smite Twitchy League, which means we keep track of everything on our end. So we have all of the elos for all of the gods within Smite and how they performed within the Smite Twitchy League, which is of course players all the way from bronze to grandmasters. So this is a great way to see that on average, what gods are doing the best throughout kind of the entirety of the Smite repertoire of players and gods. As far as the actual rankings themselves, S gods are going to be gods that had masters plus elo. A will be platinum elo. B will be gold plus. So this is going to be the gods that basically had the starting elo plus. C will be gods that have that kind of starting elo minus, but still in gold. And D will be any of the gods that got demoted down to silver or bronze. So once again, that'll be grandmasters, platinum, gold upper half, gold lower half, and then anybody that got demoted to silver and bronze. And we're going to be doing it alphabetically this time. Step 1, we have got Achilles, and Achilles found himself in platinum. So this is going to be in no particular order, by the way, within the actual tiers themselves, just because we're doing it in alphabetical order, because it seems just makes more sense this way. So they're just going to drop within their tier itself. Achilles, right into platinum. He's been a solid god for a while, honestly. He works well in solo lane. He works well in the jungle. So he's got multiple roles that he can do really well in. And he's also a really popular pick. He's got a really, really, really high pick rate as well. One of the more popular picks in the entire league, actually. And that's what brought him up to platinum. Then we've got ourselves Agni. He found himself right there in that gold tier. Agni is not a super popular mid laner. He's been doing very okay. I do think that with this Sphere of Desolation, Magus, Soul Reaver, kind of low percent penetration builds that we're seeing come out of... Oh, I did this wrong. No, wait. Masters, platinum, gold. No, Masters. Oh, Masters, diamond. Masters, diamond, platinum. Oh, yeah, I gotta do I thought I had an extra tier. Masters, check. Diamond, platinum, gold, silver. There we go. I gotta get it on the... I forgot about the platinum tier. So he was a diamond tier. There we go. We'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post. I thought I had an extra. There's no F tier. I thought there was an F tier, to be honest. I guess I just can't read. Anyway, Agni, gold tier. He's doing solidly okay. I think that Agni will start to do better in a little bit. I think that Agni's kit is extremely solid. I just think that the kind of mid lane meta is a little weird for him right now. But just very small shifts could bring him kind of back into... Can I make... You can add an F tier? How do I add an F tier? I would love to do that. Can I do that? Can I like copy paste this template and then make an F tier really quick? That would actually be really nice. Because then I could do upper gold, lower gold as well, which would be nice. We're just kind of separating those gods. I feel like there should be a way, right? People make... How do you make a template? I feel like, can you copy and paste this template and then It's in the settings? Oh no, I don't have any settings though. The gear. S. How would I make another one though? I'd have to make a whole new. You see what I'm saying? Add a row. Add a row above, add a row below. Aha! Add a row below. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, how do I change this text? Oh yeah. Nice. That actually wasn't that hard at all. Okay. So now we can actually have this the way I wanted it. So we can have Masters for S, Diamond, Platinum, Upper Gold, Lower Gold, anybody that dropped below into Silver or Bronze. Nice. That way it's a little bit more, because obviously most of the gods, as with the, the distribution, most of them are going to end up in gold, but there is kind of a upper lower section here to kind of distinguish between those two. So just nicer that way. Anyway, yonder we wander to AMC. AMC did pretty well. He actually was a platinum god during the month of December. We've actually seen AMC get picked up pretty commonly in the SPL. He's becoming a popular mid laner. Long story short, his ultimate got buffed, and ever since his ultimate got buffed, he's been doing pretty well, that percent penetration on it has been doing a pretty dang good job. So then we got Ao Pooch. Ao Pooch actually, pretty much nobody wanted to play Ao Pooch, as checked out, because why would you play Ao Pooch when you can play basically anybody else? But he just, he showed up and he did okay. He really didn't get played that much, so there's not too much to say about Pooch, other than the fact that he had a 0.38% pick rate. So, and it's not because he was banned. He's just very unpopular in Conquest. Then we've got ourselves Amaterasu. She's also up there in that upper gold echelon as well. Mostly over there as a solo laner, where she just has a really bad laning phase. If AMA's laning phase wasn't so bad, then she would be able to actually do all right. Her late game, her team fights are fantastic with her passive and her one, but her laning phase can be so garbage and she can get bullied out so hard and fall so far behind that it doesn't end up mattering. So that's kind of her big issue there. Then we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned Anhur. Anhur doing himself pretty swell. He's just kind of a counter pick. He's also a confidence pick. You want to go for the 1v1s in the lane. You want to jump in and go for the impales. He tends to do really well into like Cupid. Cupid, a really strong hunter right now because he's got the CCME and ultimate to just kind of walk out of Cupid's ult and counter him. He does well into the Cherry as well, because Cherry can't actually get into her 3 as fast as Anhur's jump will land. So if you try to counteract the Anhur jump with the Cherry 3, you're going to get hit by it every time. So he's got his good matchups. And honestly, he doesn't really have any horrible matchups. So he's also a fairly safe pick as well. Then we got ourselves Anubis. Anubis, not another god that's not super popular. Mostly with how risky the mid lane is right now. It's kind of hard to get away with going the Gooby because you have to walk up to clear the wave with your 1. That's kind of what makes Gooby good, is being able to clear the wave with that. But if you walk up to clear the wave with your 1, Lord knows the Fenrir jungle's right around the corner, because he cleared and got level 2 before your wave even showed up in mid, which means you're about to be puppy chow. So being puppy chow is bad. Then we've got the Quanger Banger. He's our first one down here. Ao Kuang is a magical assassin for all intents and purposes. He's a magical jungler in a meta where magical junglers are not good. They are just simply not good. He is nothing wrong with his kit. Ao Kuang's kit is totally fine. The itemization, the pathing, the gank schedule, the farming. It's all against him. It's all against him. My man can't buy Jotun's Wrath and Blackthorn's Hammer, and so he's out of it. That's basically all it comes down to. Then we've got Aphrodite, and she's doing okay. Aphrodite is a god that you pick to pair with other gods. She's basically like, hey, we got a really good player in the jungle on a hyper carry, right? Like we got Tsukiyomi, and he's going to carry our brains out over in the jungle. All we need to do is keep him alive. And Aphrodite is like, I volunteer as tribute. And so she raises her hand and she goes in there, and all you do is keep your hyper carry alive. Can't kill the guy that's killing your whole team. Congratulations, you're going to be all right. Her laning phase is pretty schmeh, though. Pretty schmeh. Then we've got Apollo. Apollo not doing too shabby. A lot of the hunters actually doing too well. He was up in that platinum tier. His ability to globally rotate is kind of Apollo's big thing. That's what makes him strong. He just was able to rotate around the map, split push, that kind of stuff. His 1v1 in lane clear isn't bad as well. And really, when you get to the late stages of the game, being able to split push over in the duo lane while your team is, contesting Fire Giant, and you can either ulti over or get the Phoenix, depending on whatever your team needs, just adds you a lot of leeway. Same kind of concept with Chernobog as well. Then we've got Arachne. Arachne doesn't love the meta that we're in terms of the builds. Same kind of thing with Kuang, but luckily she still is a physical damage dealer, which means she just has to suck it up and basically go some sort of like swordy style crit build where you can get a Golden Blade online, and Golden Blade's not a great item, but like, hey, it helps you clear the jungle, and clearing is super important. So you grab a Golden Blade, you clear it through the jungle, and bada bing, bada boom. If you can get a crit build online, blink on the hunter in the back and try to one-shot them before they one-shot you, you've at least got a shot at it. And then we've got Ares. Ares, surprisingly, not doing particularly well this month. Was a fairly popular pick. Had a lot of games played, but not a particularly impressive win rate here on the Ares. He was actually pretty much neutral in the support role in terms of his elo, and he actually had a couple of games elsewhere that he had lost in. But Ares has the potential to really carry games, but he is also arguably one of the most difficult supports in the entire game to play. Ares chains are just not an easy ability for most players to land. And so Ares kind of has a lot of that. The more people are playing him, the wider range of people that you get playing him. In general, he's going to drop down a little bit because he reminds me a lot of, he's kind of like in the Persephone range of things, where like a crazy good Ares player, it can wreck, but like an average Ares player, really hard to like position yourself properly. You got to build a wing blade, you got to do a lot of tertiary types of stuff. Artemis had a little bit of love, going entirely neutral in her STL for December. Nice 50-50 for her. Artemis doesn't have any lane clear, so depending on who you're against in the lane, you're gonna get out cleared out your brains. Artemis has never been able to lane clear. You don't really worry about that. If you pick Artemis, you're saying out loud to your team, I'm AFK until the 30-minute marker, and then I will come in with Tusky, and me and Tusky will clean up the game. So if that is your play style, that could work for you. Then we've got Artio. Artio, same kind of thing for Artio. This has consistently been happening with her. This is kind of the second month in a row that we've seen Artio do poorly. It's not that she's an entirely overrated character. It's just that she's more annoying then she necessarily is fantastic. In the solo lane, she's got a bunch of sustain, and she provides a source of magical damage, so you can have a physical jungler in magical damage in the solo. It's annoying. She's got a bunch of cripples. It's annoying. She's got a bunch of CC and sustain. But at the end of the day, she doesn't necessarily provide the same amount of oomph that just having a warrior over in the solo lane does. To be clear, good games, those are the exact same thing. What you just said is the same thing twice. And then we got ourselves Athena. Athena got herself up here. Athena's ability to support is still there. She still has the global presence. I don't recommend running her in any other lane. We saw a couple like Athena jungles, couple like Athena solos. She really isn't meant for anything right now outside of the support role. Her jungle clear, while it's okay, is not an assassin. You can't get it. And her solo lane, once again, you're not a warrior. So it's just the fact that she's not a physical damage and can't build those items in those roles, which is the biggest problem for her, of course. And then after Athena, we have Atlas. Atlas, I do believe, is the one character that we don't have on this list. And so Atlas actually fell directly into platinum already. Atlas was doing quite well. So Atlas was up here in the B tier. This is the only god that's not quite updated yet on the tier list. But Atlas came right out the bat, and he was released, and he wasn't very good, and nobody wanted to play him. And then he got a hot fix buff, and that hot fix buff was really hot for Atlas. And he went from nobody wanting to play him to getting picked up quite often in the support role because he actually does have some pretty big plays that he can make. And so that's what brought him up to platinum, and it brought him up to platinum pretty quickly. He even made the top 5 supports list, and he was not around for all of December, so it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up falling in January as well. Then we had ourselves a little bit of a Wheelix. A Wheelix is just all about pairings. It's all about who you are going to run with her kind of thing. You don't necessarily just kind of pick her willy-nilly. You're like, okay, we got a Sobek or a Geb support. We got a Wukong in the solo, right? Like, we've got knock-up options. I'm going to pick the Wheelix for the jungle. We're going to have all this extra CC, the ability to pull people out of their range, and she's still a very good 1v1er, and her ability to get stupidly high power with Boomba's Spear is still possible, especially when you get that Boomba Spear prod going. Then we got Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga had a okay time this particular month. I think that the Book of the Dead build got people playing more Baba Yaga. It got more people interested in playing her, but also I think people tried to experiment pretty hardcore with like, okay, well, if I'm doing the Book of the Dead build and she can stack, then I might as well do all the stacking items. And now I've got a Book of Thoth and a Warlock Sash and a Karen's Coin and any other stacking item that I can think of. And so sometimes you don't get necessarily the most meta situations on Baba because you kind of get like the fun builds. And I think that hurt her as well. Then we got ourselves a Bacchus. Bacchus is just not doing great. He's been having a hard time for a long time, honestly. Doesn't have great lane clear. He has a pretty good solid fight for like the 2v2, 3v3, assuming you don't get decimated in the laning phase and get put behind and all that kind of good stuff. Because he does work well with like the Pridven, you ulti, and then you got the shield, now you're running at him, then you slow him down again, they were drunk, they couldn't get away. Like, you got fairly good synergy in there, but he's been on the outside of the meta for quite a while. Really, it's been leaning more into the defensive supports, which is why I think even Atlas did so well. The like Kepris of the world kind of thing, you know, the people that can resurrect and stuff have really been more popular in this like super high damage meta. Bakasura, kind of in line with Arachne, where it's not that he isn't good, it's that the builds right now are just not meta for Baka. Like, you can't just be running around with the Jotun's Wrath on Baka. It just doesn't make any sense. So same concept as Arachne. You got to get the Golden Blade. You go for the farm. You try to out-farm the enemy, get ahead really quick, and then every time your ultimate is up, you can go in and look for a gank kind of thing. Not a very popular pick as well, but solidly okay. He's definitely not meta. He's just solidly okay. Then we got another solidly okay god. That is going to be Baron Samedi. Baron Samedi, same thing as a lot of the other mid laners right now. Not having a true getaway in the mid lane makes your life unnecessarily difficult. Junglers are there at level 2, at level 3, at level 4, at level 5, and every level in between. He has, at best, a movement speed buff, reliable on the fact that you hit a damage ability against an enemy god, which is just not where you want to be right now. That's not, you want to be safely either under your tower and clearing from 90 miles away, or you want to be able to safely get to your tower really quickly, and Baron simply cannot do that. Then we got Bastet. Bastet did pretty well. She was up in the platinum tier. Bastet kind of falls in an interesting conundrum that we see this happen sometimes with gods in Smite. It's always an interesting spot. She's objectively a good god, hence why she's in platinum. But with gods that get banned pretty often, right? Bastet's a pretty popular ban. With gods that get banned pretty often, sometimes, not even sometimes, a lot of the times, their ban rates are much higher than like how much they win percentily. And a lot of the times that's because you don't play a god, let's say like Bastet, for let's say 15 games in a row. And then Bastet gets left open. Then you go, oh, fantastic, Bastet's open, she's OP, we win. And then you go to play her and you realize you don't actually have that much practice on her because she's been banned so often. We see that happen a lot at all levels of skill, where it's like you kind of just assume you're going to be able to play them because they're the strong god. But because you don't have as much practice on somebody else, sometimes you play them to a worse degree than you would have if you just would have picked the god that you're used to playing. So in that platinum tier, not any higher than that platinum tier this time, we've got Bellona. Bellona actually is the warrior version of Baka and Arachne, which is that there's nothing wrong with Bellona's kit. There's nothing wrong with it. She just is not an ability-based warrior in the solo lane. You're going to see gods like Achilles do really well over there. Why? Because he can clear the wave and he can poke you at the same time, and he can go into the stupid warrior's axe and the mystical mail and the blackthorn hammer and all that good stuff. And meanwhile, Bellona's sitting over there and she's chilling and she's like, I don't know, man, like, how good is Berserker's shield right now? And then Smite's like, it's not that good. And she's like, oh, sad, you know? That's how it goes down. Then we've got ourselves Cabrakan. Cabrakan is a god that has really strong times in Smite. Like, Cabrakan will go from not being played at all to like, it's Cabrakan time, Cabrakan mania. But as we've talked about, Cabrakan is a magical character in a physical meta in the roles that he typically thrives at. Cabrakan, not really a support. Historically in Smite has always been more of a solo laner and a jungler, and neither of them are particularly, neither of those roles are particularly good right now for him. So he does have that problem going. He does have that problem. Then we've got Camazotz. Camazotz doing much better. Doing much better this split. Camazotz still not doing particularly well in the solo lane for the general populace. Solo lane is really where like he thrives at like the competitive level. But for the average player, Camazotz is much better actually as a jungler. As a jungler is where he's getting many more of his wins. In fact, probably would have been even higher on the list if he would have been played less in the solo lane. But still a very good god, and he does, of course, have the ability to play multiple roles. Then we've got Cerberus. Speaking of gods that can play multiple roles, we got ourselves another platinum god. Cerberus, mostly a support, mostly a aggressive support right now. But he does pop up in the solo lane a lot of the times when there's going to be excess healing in the match. Not only does he have the built-in anti-heal with his passive, but he's also a viable user of Tainted Steel, which means that he can basically get all the anti-heal right off the bat if he really wants to. So if the enemy team is getting brave enough to run some healers, Cerberus can shut that down really quick. And we've seen him pop up both in support and in solo lane, although he did perform better as a support. Then we got some Cernunnos action. Cernunnos just kind of a very average ADC right now. He did get a small buff to his ultimate, where his ulti now does do that minion damage, so he can like use it on you on the wave and then go to clear, and then go clear with it and then attack you. So he's got a little bit better of a 1v1 in the hunter lane, but still very just a very average hunter on the whole. His passive is also cool. But having to be in melee range as a hunter is always one of those like give and take kind of things. So you just got to be careful with the Cern. Chalk, once again, Chalk performing quite well. Up in the platinum tier, almost exclusively in the solo lane. A couple of games that were played on him, I do believe, in the jungle, with a more power-oriented build. But Chalk is always going to be a good god for the average player. He's one of those gods that you play, and even like some like of the high tier players really like Chalk, and so they'll play him as well. But just for an average Smite player, you're over in the solo lane and you want to make sure that you're not going to screw up, and you want to make sure that the enemy solo laner is not going to get fed and anything like that. You go ahead and you pick Chalk. You do well in the lane. You probably don't crush it, but you don't really lose the lane. You do pretty dang good. You get out of there, and then you go into the team fights, and you didn't feed your enemy solo laner, and they don't have a 5 level ahead Mulan running at them and stuff. And that will always be an extremely valuable asset that Chalk provides to the world, to all of Smite. It will always be very nice that he provides a god that anybody can just play in the solo lane. So that's nice. Now we've got Chang'e. Same kind of thing with Chang'e and the Aphrodite. She provides the healing to the team, but she also provides anti-healing to the team. We also saw Chang'e run in quite a few roles. The only role that she performed well in was the mid lane. Don't run Chang'e in the solo lane. If you're running mages in the solo lane, you're going to be lacking frontline. And if you're lacking frontline, chances are your team is going to lose. As much as it is, you want to output the extra damage in the lane or whatever and be annoying. It's just not, it never works out while having instead of having the front line. You need at least 2 frontliners on your team. You have to have the support front line. You have to have the solo lane front line. If you don't have 2 frontliners, you're going to have a hard time in the game. But she is a quite viable mid laner, particularly with that ultimate. Then we've got Cherry. Cherry's a very, very difficult god to play. She was quite popular as a hunter, but she does have a very high level of skill that you need to play her. Which is funny considering that she has one of the best getaway skills in the game. But that getaway skill does have a large wind-up time, which you can get interrupted out of. We talked about that earlier with Anhur, and Anhur jump will always interrupt you out of it if you try to react to the Anhur jump sound. But she's got great lane clear because of her through autos. She's got a fantastic 1v1. She's got built-in penetration, which is really nice right now because there's so many, you know, crit builds going around that just having any built-in pen like AMC obviously liked having the built-in pen is really nice right now because it allows you to focus on more items like Deathbringer and that kind of stuff. Then we got ourselves Chernobog, not quite doing as well as his fellow global ult counterpart in Apollo, but still doing decent. Chernobog, for a while, has kind of been the slightly worse version of Apollo, so I don't think it's particularly surprising to find him 1 tier below the Apollo, because that's kind of what he's known for. He's like, I'm the slightly less good Apollo. Like, you know, you wanna mix it up? You're tired of playing Apollo, but you kind of want to play the same character? So come play Chernobog. Now a hunter that's been doing real swell, actually. Real swell in the hunter department. This is very interesting. This is going to be our second diamond. Chiron has been crushing it over in the hunter role for this particular split. It also makes sense with some of the other hunters that we're going to see coming up in the list. But Chiron has very good 1v1 potential. He obviously works really well with Crusher, which is probably the most commonly bought, I would say, first hunter item right now, outside of a couple of hunters that go the Shadow Steel. But being able to get the early Crusher on Chiron, who has 4 abilities that can proc it, and then all you have to do is 1 auto attack, 2 auto attack. That's basically enough to kill the enemy hunter right off the bat with all the power that you're getting from Death Toll and the Crusher. Plus, of course, it's hitting the wave at the same time, so you get the 2-for-1 deal at Costco with Chiron. Then we've got ourselves a little bit of Chronos. Chronos had a solid showing in the mid lane, but he was also pulled out in quite a few other roles, much like Chang'e, actually. Chronos was pulled out in the ADC role and did not do particularly well. He was also pulled out in the solo lane and did not do particularly well. But in the mid lane, he was actually doing quite good. As it turns out, mages, for the most part, should be over in the mid lane with a very few exceptions. And so that's where he is thriving. That's where you're going to want to play him if you want to win with him. Then we've got Cleodonia. For anybody that's played against Cleo, you know that she's pretty good. She's up in our platinum tier. She goes into walls. She stays in walls. You go, certainly there's not anybody in the wall. It's a giant wall. I won't get ganked. I feel very safe here. And then she screams at you, and then your ears start bleeding, and then you get pinchered in between her ultimate, and then you try to auto attack her back, and then you realize that her ultimate has an HP bar for some reason, and she's using it for body blocks, and then you go back to the fountain. Cleo. Cthulhu! Same situation as pretty much the rest of our magical guardians that are not really supports. Cthulhu is a solo lane guardian in a solo lane guardianless meta. And so when he gets picked up, he does solidly okay. Give or take, probably could have just had a warrior instead. And he doesn't work as a support because he has basically no real peel in his kit. Much more of an initiator than he is necessarily a peeler. Cucullin, man, poor Cucullin. He went from being so good to just falling off of the planet this year, really. He's had a hard time. He was so strong when he had that level 2 transform, and it would just be able to fight right away and go immediately and get a first blood in the solo lane, and then snowball out of control. And then they nerfed it over and over and over and over again. And now nobody plays him because he doesn't get to do that kind of craziness at level 2. It's like, if you want to get a bunch of craziness at level 2, you just play Mulan, and then you just go in on the enemy player. Cucullin just kind of got pushed right out of the side. Now, one of the best hunters so far has been Cupid. Cupid has been performing really well. His combination of a high CC on a hunter, having that stun plus a mez on a hunter is really nice. Plus, people forget, but he has a built-in stim, not like a stim that you press, but when you level up your dash, you're also passively getting increased attack speed, which means that he can also get away with going a crit build because he has built-in attack speed already in his kit. Plus, he has built-in sustain for staying in the lane for before you get your Aussie online. Overall, just a solid hunter. Really, the premium counter pick hunter. You don't necessarily just pick Cupid willy-nilly, but against any hunter that doesn't have a CC immune ultimate, you basically just default win the lane. They picked the Shibalanke. Congrats, you've got Cupid. What does he do? Literally nothing. Believe me, been there, done that. It's not fun. Then we got Daji, a solidly okay jungler. She's doing fine. You don't pick Daji into team compositions that have a lot of CC immunity. She works better as a 4th, 5th pick, particularly against gods that do not have CC immune ults, because then you force them to beads every single time. And your ultimate is going to be up more than their beads, especially because you're going to get like a first time Jones Wrath, and then you just get your ultimate on cooldown really low, and then you're just like, bam, 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 bam. Welcome to the Daji pool. Danzaburrow, his gameplay getting picked up quite a bit here. I think that the current build path for hunters has really favored Danzaburrow, particularly the inclusion of Fail Not coming back into builds has really helped him out. He's really had a lot of help with that. You rocket into somebody, the rocket hits them, now they're stunned. You got an extra 20% crit from your Fail Not. They're standing still. You can't miss the autos. Welcome to Crit Town. How may I take your order? Then we've got Discordia. Discordia performing so very well, man. So very, very well. Probably the most underrated god, I would say, in the STL. For the month of December, she performed extremely well. Popular pick with a great win rate. I think it really comes down to the fact that she can clear from a safe distance. She has long safe clearing abilities, and she's very sneakily a safe god to pick in the mid lane as well, because she's got a small leap to get over player made walls, which is also an immunity frame, and she's got a CC immune ultimate. And I think that those things combined make her a lot safer than people think that she actually is. Then we've got ourselves a little bit of Erlang action. Erlang kind of dropped off. He was everywhere for a while. Definitely performing better in jungle than anywhere else. He's kind of, the assassin that isn't. So So whether you're running mannequins for the AoE mannequins proc in the jungle, or even the new, kind of slightly buffed Eye of the Jungle for all of the HP 5 and MP 5, he does better when he gets to run around and actually utilize all of his CC for ganking as early as possible. Throw out the knockup, throw out the root, hit him with the taunt, all that good stuff. Not the solo laner that he used to be. Would not recommend running him over in that solo lane. Definitely a jungler above all else. Then we got E-Set. E-Set, also very surprising. Wait a second. E-Set? Oh, they've got her as, you see E-Set, but she's over here because they have her as, you know what I'm saying. I can't say the word because it's going to be a video, and then I end up on a list. It's a whole thing. So, E-Set actually performed quite better than I think anybody expected. She actually got herself up into the platinum tier. And funny enough, she had a positive win ratio basically anywhere that she was played. She only had a couple of games in some off roles, but like she even won a couple of games over in the support. I don't know what to say. She obviously performed the best in the mid lane. That's clearly her role as a mage. And so it shouldn't be any surprise. That is the role that she did the best in. But she honestly didn't do that bad. And I'm not going to delve into the data on that anymore because I don't know. Maybe she's secretly good. She did well. She did well. Good for her. Good for my E-Set. It's been a while. Another god that did well was Fafnir. Fafnir, a harder support to play, I would say, for most people. His hammer is kind of his whole kit, and if you can consistently hit his hammer, you're gonna have a good time on Fafnir. And if you cannot consistently hit it, then it's like playing Thanatos without being able to hit your scythe, which is to say you're gonna have a bad time. So what I recommend is getting yourself very comfortable hitting that Fafnir hammer. Also, Fafnir tends to do well against a couple of other gods that got popped up. He's a good counter pick as well. When you see the Freyas pop up, she's getting a little bit more popular. Not that she's necessarily getting better, but she is getting more popular because when a god gets picked at like a SPL level of play, they pop back up everywhere. And as this tier list is actually a great example because this tier list is for the average Smite player because it's a conglomerate of all levels of gameplay. Just because a god does really well in the SPL does not mean that they're gonna be really good wherever you're playing the game, So that's a good point to get across here. But Fafnir did well. All right, now onward to a god that didn't do well. He did absolutely dummy thick well, and that is going to be Fenrir, the first one up in the Masters tier. Fenrir is a menace to society, and he should be chained up once again and unreleased and never let back out of that stupid cage. Somebody go find Tyr and tell him we need his other hand. Okay? We need it. Fenrir, Brutalize is just an ability. Auto lock on 900 damage abilities that you can follow up with Hydra's procs before and after. CC immune ultimates that last for 7 seconds that can burn people's beads without ever have to actually using it. Multiple movement abilities, built-in life steal, CC out the wazoo. The one thing you have to watch out for is like a team that has all the cripples. Like if you ever wanted to see like the Ares and Artio thrive, it would be against the Fenrir. But yeah, bloated doggo. Here's a god that's popping up in a lot of popularity. Freya is getting more popular, but she's not necessarily getting more better. She's doing very okay. I think a lot of people are picking her up. If I had to guess, I saw Zapman playing a lot of Freya. And typically when pro players start to play something, everybody starts to pick it up, which is fine. Play whoever you want. But they're not necessarily, the pros don't necessarily play the easiest characters. They're not necessarily playing a god that's super easy to pick up and then you can do it all willy-nilly. They're not even necessarily picking up gods that work well without a full team in comms and drafting together and working together. So a lot of things come down for Freya, and I think that a lot of it is just the fact that she's just not the average player's easiest pick. You know, she really requires, you have to run a hunter in the mid lane if you want to do the mage in the duo lane right now, which then throws your mid laner off because your mid laner is probably used to playing mages and maybe he's not comfortable playing hunters. And so then there's a lot of stuff there's a large rabbit hole to go down. Then we got our second Master's God. It's Ganesh. Historically, one of my least favorite gods in the game, which is nothing against Ganesh. It's just that I can't get kills with him because his passive doesn't let me. I've actually been liking Ganesh, though, more personally as of recently. Maybe I've been liking him more because he's so damn good. Maybe I just like winning. But Ganesh, solid laning phase with good lane clear, which of course we know is important because not only does his clear go through the whole wave, he can hit the archers, he also gives that bonus damage out to his hunter to help clear the wave faster. On top of that, he's got a bunch of great CC, and Ohm is one of the best support ults in the game, I would say, because it's a combination, can burn objectives, which basically no supports can do. That's kind of Ganesh's thing. It does a ton of damage to objectives, Fire Giant, Gold Fury, etc. It is a body block if you position it correctly, like it's a physical body block. It is a high amount of CC and a giant zoner inside of the ulti, and on top of that, it is also a generically annoying ability to deal with because of the CC that it provides. So Ganesh's ultimate really, them Pillars of Eternity are very problematic for everybody on the enemy team. So you got to watch out. You got to watch out for the Ganesh. Now, Geb did perform better this month. He did perform better this month than he has in months past. He got himself up to the diamond tier. Geb is objectively a good support, but his ban rate has always been very, very high. And so Geb had a little bit of a roller coaster this month, I would say, in December. In November, he was played so rarely because he was almost always banned. And then in December, he started to be banned less because people haven't played against Geb in a while. But then people hadn't played Geb in a while, right? And so then people are playing Geb and they haven't played Geb in a while, and then they're losing games because they weren't really in the swing of things with Geb. And so then he kept not getting banned, but then people started getting better at it because they started playing him more, and then he started getting more wins. And so Geb kind of had a bit of a roller coaster over the last couple of months that have been fun to watch. But I think he's probably now in about the right spot, which is where he's banned sometimes, not all the times. And he's got a pretty solid win ratio, getting himself up into that diamond tier. I think this is probably where Geb actually more so belongs. Then we've got Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh got himself up into that nice platinum tier. Also, one of the few gods that did well in multiple roles. It's not super easy for a god to win in multiple roles in Smite right now. in the past, it's not been that uncommon, but as we've talked about a lot on this tier list, it's pretty strict what roles can play, what lanes right now. It's like probably one of the most strict it's been in Smite's history. Normally it's kind of loosey-goosey with it. But Gilgamesh actually can play solo and jungle both very well. He's kind of got that Achilles thing where he is a warrior, but he also has that kind of assassin flair in the form of like his movement in CC that allow him to also be a good jungler. Then we've got Guan Yu, also going to get himself up into the diamond tier. Guan Yu's really comes down to two things. One, healing is good. Right? We like healing. Healing is good. Now, healing did get nerfed. A couple months ago, they did another 10% on that out of combat healing debuff. But that actually tended to hurt like the healers a little bit more, you know, the Aphrodite hells of the world that tend to hurt them actually a little bit more than to necessarily hurt Guan. Also, Guan gets the added bonus of being a warrior in solo that doubles as a healer. So some of the other healers that we talked about them not being able to be played over in solo lane because then you lose the front line on your team. Guan Yu, you still get the front line while getting the healing on your team, which is what has allowed him to do so good. You don't have to sacrifice the front line in order to get the healing. Other healers should be running the mid lane. Then we got Hachiman. Hachiman is going to be slightly below down here. Hachi as a slightly less than average god kind of makes sense. And part of it, I do think, is that the fact that Hachi is pretty okay as a god overall. I don't think anybody really stands for Hachi. I'm sure I just upset all 7 Hachi stands. I'm sorry. But Hachi is also the god. Hachi is like chalk. Hachi is like chalk, except for the fact that hunters are just harder to play, right? Hachi is the hunter that people go to when they don't really know how to play hunter. You get thrown into the ADC role and you go, hey, I'm not comfortable with this role. Who should I play? Oh, you should play Hachi. He's got a CC immune ulti that to get away. He's also got a dash. So he's got like some of that kind of stuff to work with. You've got a longer range that you can use. Except for the fact that chalk is way easier to play because solo laners, you can get away with way more stuff than you can in the dual lane, and dual lane is just kind of generically hard to play right now. And so Hachi ends up below there. Then we've got Hades. Hades is going to be another guy that ends up down here on the old listy list. Doesn't really have a meta right now for Hades. He loves the life steal items. You know, he's a Bancroft's Vamp Shroud and Typhon's Fangin kind of boy. You can't really get away with that over in the solo lane, right? As we've discussed 1,000 times. Warriors. In the mid lane, he's pretty dang risky. You don't have to dash to clear the wave, but you walk up to the wave, you clear it, and then if you're building full damage, now you're kind of a frontline mage, which is just a hard thing to pull off. And so it's just not a good itemization right now, not a good meta for Hades. A lot of the times when Hades is really strong, he ends up being a solo laner. Almost all the time. Very few metas in Smite where Hades has been like a meta mid laner, like that's the role you want to play him in. Every once in a while, though, he pops up and he starts decimating over in the solo lane, and you're like, by God, Divios is here. No more Hades. Then we've got Hubwa. Hubwa was not a particularly popular pick. He was slightly below average yet again. His getaway skill is his ultimate. That's a hard spot to be in. I actually think that the very recent no book build, people kind of going that Spear of Desolation, flat pen, Soul Reaven, Prockin build could be beneficial for Hebo. But I also think it's just a hard freaking meta for Hebo. A huge indication of how good Hebo is going to be in the meta is how high the puppy is in the meta. And when the puppy is up here, Hebo doesn't tend to be too close because puppy go brutalize and Hebo go bye-bye. And that's the end of the game. So pretty strong correlation between Fenrir being good and Hebo not being good. Then we've got Heim doing solidly okay. Heim is a strong hunter, but he is not an easy hunter to play. I would say that Heim's teleport ability, while being a fantastic ability, is just hard for people to use properly. It's hard to know when to use it. It's hard to know when to position it. His ultimate is a lot like Neja, where it's great when you hit it, but it's not a free ability to hit. You don't just get to land it because you use it. You have to really aim it. You gotta think about how close you want to be to the target. Plus, he has a very strange auto attack chain, which I also think can throw people off with him having that much slower auto attack. Solid hunter, a lot of potential there. Very hard for a lot of levels of gameplay, I would say. Heck, I've been playing Smite for forever, and sometimes even on Heim, I'm like, okay, I gotta focus up. You know what I'm saying? Like playing like Heim and like talking to chat at the same time is hard. You got to be like laser focused on what you're doing to make sure that you're always got your stuff set up correctly. It's kind of like playing an RTS, you know? There's a little bit of that like micromanaging that goes on with the Heim at the same time. Then we've got Hel doing just about as well as her other healer counterparts. Right in that spot of play me in the mid lane and please don't play me in solo because you're going to regret not having that extra front line. Hope the team doesn't build all the anti-healing in the world. Hope you get a little bit ahead early. Lord knows that Hel can snowball out of control. But also, Hel can get behind. I'd say she's a bit of a risky pick. Not very often that you look over and you're like, wow, our Hel is having a super average game. It's usually like, wow, our Hel is 12-0, we won the game. Or, wow, our Hel is still level 2. It's going to be a long one. That's usually the more of the case for Hel. Then we've got Hera. Hera has just not been having a fun time for a long time. Hera's biggest issue is just the state of the meta. Not necessarily in terms of build. Builds are not her issue. She actually likes the Book of the Dead build that's going around. Made it sound like COVID. You know, the Book of the Dead build. It's going around. Everybody's building it. But Hera's biggest issue is the fact that in order for her to efficiently clear the wave, you have to walk up literally to the melee creeps to then use your one as your main form of clear, which means now you're halfway down the lane, and being halfway down the lane in the mid lane is being 100% into the danger zone. And so I don't recommend it. You got to have very, very safe wards placed out, defensive wards, all the times if you're going to play Hera. 100% of the time, defensive wards. Then we have got Hercules. I can't believe it, but Hercules gonna be our first god down in silver tier. One of a few gods, I think one of two. One of only two gods that's down in silver tier. Absolutely atrocious performance. Not an insignificant amount of games played. Certainly not. In fact, not a bad pick rate. He had about a 10% pick rate, showing up in about 1 in every 10 games, but just performing atrociously. Super negative in the support role, negative over in the solo role. The only role he came out positive in was jungle, and it looked like he only had a couple of games over in the jungle where he had a whopping +8 elo. But on the whole, ended up down about 150 elo or so from the starting point. He had a really, really hard split. There you go. Then we got ourselves some Horus. Horus, doing very okay. Horus is a kind of an awkward spot. Horus is a warrior who's not a solo. He's a support, but Guardians are actually the best supports right now by like a lot. Like Guardians are really like the supports. So he has like a strong laning phase over in the duo lane. Like a lot of the times you'll get a first blood over there with a Horus because he has that double CC at level 2 where you get the knockup and a stun, which is also protection shred. Like what a wombo combo. But he's a warrior, so you'd think he'd work over in the solo lane. But he's just not got the kit of a solo laner. He's not going to dive into the back line and be like, I'm going to kill their hunter. He's really more of like a, let's get in there, team. Let's get out of there, squad. I'm going to peel for you and save your life. As it turns out, because he's a support in his heart of hearts. So he's just in a weird spot. He's just in a weird spot. He's the guardian that's actually a warrior. Weird spot for him. Then we've got Hou Yi. Hou Yi doing fine. Not a horrible meta for Hou Yi. Having that anti-crit passive means that his 1v1 potential is absolutely there in the ultra late stages of the game. Once builds are complete, you've got the opportunity to go for those big plays, those big 1v1s, because the enemy gets one crit on them and you get as many crits on them as you can land auto attacks. But Hou Yi does have a fairly high skill cap with Ricochet. If you can consistently be landing ricochets, then Hou Yi can be an absolutely top hunter. But that is a ability that even pro players will miss consistently, especially when you're going for the spicy ricochet, which I don't necessarily recommend always going for. Hun Batz did himself real well up in the diamond tier. Hun Batz has very quickly become the bane of my existence. Not only is Hun Batz a good jungler, people forget how good his early game jungle clear is. It's really, really good with the Sacred Monkey. People always tend to think of Hun Batz as like a low clear god, but he's not. He actually has really, really good jungle clear, and then he transitions into, obviously everybody knows him for Fear No Evil. He has a fantastic team fight. And as it turns out, he can get to that team fight really quickly nowadays with how good his clear is. He's got a Jotun's Wrath. He's going to have full CDR really, really quickly, which means that you're getting Fear No Evil all the time. And if the enemy team pairs this with a Morrigan, you're not going to win. I don't know how to tell you this, but 2 times Hun Batz ults on one team is the worst thing I've ever played against. And I've had to play it against too many times as of late. So ban one of them. Do yourself a favor. If they have a Hun Batz, no Morrigans, no double monkeys. I'm going to have monkey flashbacks for years. Waking up in a flop sweat. One more Hun Batz ult, so help me. Then we have Izanami, who has the honor of being the #1 performing god in the STL for December. Izanami is actually a bit of a crossover event here between the average Smite player and the really high-end tier players. We're seeing Izanami pop up a whole lot everywhere. And really all it comes down to is clear in Smite is good. As it turns out. Turns out, if you can clear the wave really fast and you get more levels than your opponent, you can force the fight with a higher level with your minions, and then you get a kill. And when you get that kill, that means you go invade the jungle. And when you take that jungle, you get another level. And then you come back, and they come back, and now you got 2 levels. So she has just been absolutely decimating, of course, mostly as a ADC. That is her absolute role that she is decimating. Good 1v1, good team fight, fantastic escape skill, good ultimate, huge burst damage potential. Watch out for Cupid is basically my only advice. Watch out for Cupid. Cupid will get you. He's your counter. So keep an eye. Keep an eye on Cupid. If he's coming for you, you could have a hard time. Outside of that, we got Janice, who seemingly might be one of the only gods that managed to do it. But Janice managed to keep exactly the average elo. Exactly. He did not move up or down. A single point of elo. Absolutely neutral on the Janice, directly in the middle of all things. Janice has a bit of a roller coasters. He tends to go on these like streaks of losing and these streaks of winning where he just kind of woo, 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 woo. But as it turns out, that averaged out and it was exactly even for him. So there you go. Congratulations, Janice. Then we have got Jing Wei. Jing Wei did get a small buff recently that honestly didn't really help her. You would think that she would be more popular in this super heavy crit meta that we're in. But she just does okay. She just does okay. Like, you play her, she feels okay. You play against her, you're not like, I mean, when's the last time you were like scared to play against a Jingwei? You're scared to play against like Izanami. You play against Jingwei, you're like, I mean, she's not going to fall behind an XP. But like, half the time she'll be in the air and I don't have to worry about her. Then we've got Jorm. Jorm also doing very okay. Same situation as kind of the Kabrakins and Cthulhu's of the world. Jorm is a guardian that is not a support. He is a solo lane guardian. Solo lane guardian itemization is pretty much garbage. And so he doesn't really have a crazy good spot in the meta. And he is not a mid laner, no matter how many times Tubby tries to make him a mid laner. Kali doing fairly well in the STL. The average STL game goes slightly longer than the average Smite game. And by slightly longer, I mean you actually get to play a game of Smite. You don't surrender in 10 minutes. Which means that the average STL game is about 30 minutes long, which means characters like Kali do have a decent chance of coming online and getting to that stage of the game that they're known for with that ultra late. Same kind of thing with Freya, like they do have the opportunity to get there. But they are high skill cap characters. They do have the ability to get CC'd out. Great example of a god that's super good against Kali, Ganesh. Ganesh is super, super good against Kali. Kali, I need you ulti so I cannot die. Ganesh, Kali, dead. You see that? Nice little god interaction right there. Then we got ourselves Khepri. Khepri is doing fan-freaking-tastic. You can see a theme with the top supports. You can see a theme here. Ganesh, Geb, Khepri. Reminder that Atlas was up here as well. We just don't have a picture for him. Defensive supports are the meta. The super hardcore defensive supports that have a little bit of lane clear are basically the meta right now. There is so much damage in the game. So much damage in the game. Everybody gets to a point where they can basically one-shot, And when you get to a meta where everybody can start to one-shot, it really becomes crucial to have somebody that can keep you alive for just a little bit longer. Capriol, little bit longer to live. Geb Shield, little bit longer. Ganesh, very important. And that's why they're doing so well. Then we got King Arthur. You actually don't even see a lot of King Arthur anymore. Knock on wood. Everybody knock on wood. Everybody all around the world, you knock on wood right now. Okay? And hopefully it stays that way forever, and I'm not going to say anything more on the subject. That's it. That's all I have to say. After Arthur, we got Kukulkan. Kukulkan did okay. Not super surprising here for the Kukulkan, because the Book of the Dead build became a thing. Kukulkan was like, Book of the Dead? Yeah, mana? Book of Thoth? Book of the Dead? AFK farm Tower Boy? Do I have an opportunity here? And so, if you AFK farm Tower Boy, and if you get your Book of Thoth, then you get your Book of the Dead, and you get this giant, massive power build, and you get a Polynomicon, turns out, Kukulkan sneeze followed by an auto attack, a lot of damage. Kukulkan ult, a lot of damage. As always with Kukulkan though, there's only 2 things that happen with Kukulkan. Only 2. Hit ulti, win game. Miss ulti, lose game. So no pressure. No pressure, my friend. Then we've got Kumbhakarna. Kumbhakarna did okay. Not a crazy popular, support, but showed up, did okay, didn't do great. I think Kumbhakarna his big issue is that in laning phase, his clear is also his movement ability. So if he tries to clear, then he's out of position, and then you get ganked, and like a whole thing happens. But Kumba got some good CC, man. When's the last time you got Kumba mezzed? Because if you got Kumba mezzed within the last 4 days, you're still mezzed. So, just, maybe give him a shot again. He's kind of interesting. Kuzenbo. Kuzenbo will always be good in crit metas. Always. Period. End of sentence. Having built-in reflex damage will always be good when people are hitting really hard. Kuzenbo walks at you, you crit him, you take lots of damage. Kuzenbo goes, ha 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 ha. Kappa kappa kappa. Crit is meta, Kuzenbo is meta. There it is. That's all there is to it. Then we got Loki. Loki did okay. He's a garbage god for garbage people, but he did okay. All right? That's it. Medusa, unfortunately, couldn't quite find her stride. She did get that change recently, where she got that exchange, where her dash is no longer her anti-heal. The anti-heal's on her spit kind of thing. So she did get a lot of games played, as a lot of people wanted to kind of try out that exchange and see how it worked for her. As it turns out, didn't make her all that much better. Still couldn't find herself a good place. Only had a 40% win rate. And she had a lot of games played, man. She had like 80 games played. So pretty popular hunter to be losing that much, honestly. Pretty popular to lose that much. Then we got Mercury. Mercury did all right. Mercury kind of falls in between the meta right now. Jungle meta specifically. ability-based jungler meta. Mercury, auto attacker. But Mercury loves crit. Crit is meta, but it's really meta for hunters. And so Mercury can be played because he can still build crit very efficiently. And he obviously got that buff where now he can kick over walls, which is nice. Just a nice quality of life. But you got to be careful in the early game. If Merc gets behind in the early game to an ability-based jungler, it means you're basically kaput for like the next 20 minutes. But if you can farm and put your head down and not worry about it, you got a good shot. Then we've got Marlin. Marlin did very okay. Merlin is like the less safe version of Discordia. Their kits actually play out fairly similarly in that regard. He has a small flicker. Discordia has a small dash. Merlin's flicker is not invulnerable. Discordia's dash is invulnerable. Discordia has a CC immune ult. Merlin does not have a CC immune ult. They can both clear the way from really far away with their arcane stance, pretty much. You see what I'm saying? Very similar ideas there. Merlin, much harder to execute, much less in the way of being able to avoid things entirely, much more susceptible to gods like Ares, who just kind of wreck Merlin's entire life. Then we have got Morgan Labe. Labe is doing pretty good. She's kind of the exception to the mid lane rule of mid laners are good when they have escape skills or if they have really long range clear. Her clear is decent ranged. It's fine. But she kind of has no getaway skill and kind of has only getaway skills at the same time. Her fear can be used to get away really well. It also doubles as a slow if you prefer that. She has a knock back and a knock up in the same ability, and she has bonus movement speed, of course, on her 3, and a CC immune ultimate that gives her the hasten fatalis effect. So she may seem like she doesn't really have a getaway skill, but in actuality, she's kind of one giant getaway skill, which is why she is actually a safe, inefficient mid laner. Then we've got Mulan once again getting herself real on high up on that list. Mostly played, of course, over in the solo lane, although mildly successful as well in the jungle. Mulan is not a crazy complicated god. She basically walks at you, presses 1, you go, wow, that was like a lot of abilities in one ability. And then she presses her 2, and you're like, wow, that was also a lot of abilities in one ability. Now it feels like you've been hit by 5 abilities within 2 abilities, and you're dead. And you look at her build, and you're like, wow, she must have a lot of damage. And you realize she's got a Mystical Mail, and a Genji's Guard, and a Pridvin. And you're like, whoa, that's a lot of base damage. Mulan. Then we got Nezha, who I think was a pretty big surprise. I would say Nezha was probably my biggest personal surprise of the month. Wait a second. No, we don't have Nezha. We have Neith. N-E space. Oh, okay. I can see that what I did here. We'll do the Nezha right now. We'll go back and do the other 2. The lists read the names differently. Nezha got himself right up into platinum. He got himself right up into platinum. Probably one of the gods that did the most better than I thought they would, if that makes sense. Nezha and Iset, I would say, are my 2 big surprises of the month, where they vastly outperformed, I would say, my expectations for them. I would have expected them to both be in that regular gold tier. But both of them managed to get some solid wins under their belts, man. Obviously, Nezha, primarily a jungler. I think a lot of it just comes down for the fact of Nezha is like you can get away with going an early Deathbringer, and then all of a sudden Nezha can start critting for 1k at like the 10-minute marker. That's a god. That's the whole dealio. Then we got Neith. Neith, another god that's doing pretty well right now. But she's a little bit unique in that Neith much better in the mid lane than she's been performing in the ADC. So much like in the SPL, how AMC has been a really strong mid laner, in the STL, Neith has actually been that equivalent, performing much better in the mid lane, able to launch out that ultimate all sides of the map. It gets there a little bit quicker. It allows you to run that magical character over in the duo lane, whether you want to run the Freya or the Soul or whatever, over in the duo lane. It opens up that possibility. A lot of people have Neith in their repertoire. She's fairly safe with the backflip, and she can go into a crit or power build right now. Either way. And then we got ourselves Nemesis. Nemesis also doing not too shabby, doing okay. Still fantastic anti-tank character. Are they running 3+ warriors / guardians? Maybe they've got a Zhong Kui on their team as well. Like, Nemesis has her purposes, and her purposes are to shred the tanks. And so she is still quite good at that. You don't necessarily want to run her into like the squishier teams. That's not where she thrives. But if they are trying to rock a giant, big, bulky boy team at you, the Nemesis can go ahead and take them down. She's got so much pen on that ultimate. And then, of course, you've got so much opportunity for building pen. With the serrated edge and even stone cutting sword for the early game on Nem is not a bad item. Then we've got Nike. Oh man, Nike has one of the higher win rates of all of the gods in the STL for December. For the amount of games that she had played, she is up in that Masters tier. Let me do some quick math here. Nike had about 80 games played with a 63% win rate. That's really good. That's a really good win rate. She wins in the solo lane because she has such good clear. And it's a 2-for-1 deal. Because of her passive, she also helps everybody on your team start to win as well once you start getting that passive online. So that's a very big one for her. Also, have you played against a Nike recently? It sucks. Because you have to get Sunder, and then now you have Sunder instead of a different active. Your Guardian basically can't get Sunder, which means only your solo laner has Sunder. And now if your solo laner misses that Sunder or it's on cooldown, you don't need that in your life. You don't need it, I promise. Then we got Nox. Nox doing a little bit better than I thought she would. I kind of thought Nox would honestly be a little bit worse than this. Not an insignificant amount of games played either. Strictly played as a mid laner, does have that setup in the mid lane. The thing about Nox is, it's not that Nox is garbage, is that Nox can't be your only magic damage. She can't be your only carry. You see what I'm saying? Chances are you might need to run an additional magic damage. Maybe you also run a magic ADC. Or something to give a little bit more oomph, and she can't be the god that carries you. She's not going to be like a Scylla and come in and kill the entire enemy team, and you're like, fantastic, all we gotta do is keep her alive. She's gonna help set up the team for you to kill them, so you as the jungler, you as the ADC, you as the whatever, needs to be the one that comes in and carries, because she's kind of like a really high damage support. Think of her more like that. Then we have got Nuwa sliding herself just barely onto the positive end of that spectrum. Nuwa, kind of hard to get away with right now. Her ultimate at the end of the game, if you haven't played against a Nuwa in a while, her ultimate at the end of the game is actually gross. Like really gross. Like its damage potential with these builds going around where you can get like 1,000 plus magical power. She has a lot of late game potential, but in Smite, as we know, late game is all fine and dandy, but there's also the 30 minutes before you get to the late game that also matter, and she is not a safe god in the mid lane. She has absolutely no way to escape outside of her ultimate, and her ultimate is, I would not call it a good laning phase getaway skill. Not a bad team fight getaway skill, because, you know, the 3 seconds you're in the air, a lot more important in the middle of a team fight, when everybody's getting one shot at the end of the game than it necessarily is in the laning phase when the jungler Robin is just like sitting there right below you being like, all right, go on down. I got time. All right, then we got ourselves Odin. Odin doing pretty good. Odin a lot like Geb. He's up here in this platinum tier. Odin, very high ban rate, a lot like Geb, where Geb had that very high ban rate. So he gets played a little bit less. Then it kind of falls into a little bit of that situation where your solo laner is playing Odin. They haven't played Odin in a little bit. They're maybe not as comfortable on Odin. Extremely annoying character. Good god. Not quite as oppressive as his level of ban rate would indicate. Not quite as oppressive as it would indicate. Performs well, good god, especially situationally against the right team comp, but particularly when teams want to first pick an Odin and then the enemy team goes, okay, make sure you pick, you know, leaps against Odin. All of a sudden he becomes a lot less miserable to play against, compared to like if you were to get late picked, which basically never happens because you could like second round ban him or something. Then we've got ourselves Oleron. Oleron also doing okay. I think Oleron is in his heart of hearts a mid laner. We see him get picked up a lot as well over in the duo lane. But I think the duo lane is just too long for Oleron. He actually reminds me a little bit of AMC in that I think that they're probably both better in the mid lane, where it's just a shorter lane that they've got less room to get ganked from. Because Oleron does have really long clear potential with his one, because it can charge up and launch so far, you can clear really safely in the mid lane from practically your tower line. But in the duo lane, you don't get that option, which means that while he did do pretty well in the mid lane, in December, he did not do well over in the ADC role, so he kind of averaged out right there into the middle. Then we've got Osiris, who didn't do too shabby. The best performing, I would say, of all of the auto-attacky warriors. He seems to have found a little bit more of a way into the meta. He's got some options. Utilizations of Death Toll for the early game sustain he can utilize pretty well. He's also got a huge asset in his kit, which is the built-in anti-heal, which means that he can also be a counter pick if the enemy team is running a heavy healing comp, particularly if they're running a mage, a healer solo, right? Which we talked about earlier, the Chang'es, Aphrodites, Hells, whatever. Especially if they're running something like that, all of a sudden Osiris is like, I'm ready to play. Then we got Pele. Pele did fine. I've always kind of made fun of Pele in calling her the worst of the ability-based junglers. She is ability-based, but she's like the most auto-attack based of the ability-based junglers, which means that she doesn't get to thrive at the same level that the Fenrirs of the world do. So she performs typically fine. She typically performs fine. She's kind of right in between the worlds. Then we've got Persephone. Persephone is not the bottom god. She is not the bottom god, guys. She got herself up into the slightly below average tier. She still was an overall negative for the month, but she was not the absolute bottom god. So everybody, a round of applause for Persephone. Yay! She moved up like 3 or 4 whole slots. Look at her. Look at that growth. Look at that wonderful garden that she's building. Good for her. She's just hard to play, man. She's hard to play. Then we got Poseidon, who got a nice little bumpity bump up here on the list, up into the platinum. He had gotten that change to his whirlpool mechanic, which has actually really allowed him to, when the more he keeps his meter up, it means the faster he's basically running around, the faster he's clearing things, which just means that in this meta where there's so much farm, a little bit faster mid lane clear, a little bit faster jungle clear, a little bit faster the mid lane, miss less creeps, a little bit faster the jungler, miss less creeps, miss less creeps, miss less creeps, get more farm. And that has been helping out Poseidon quite a bit. Also, Poseidon pretty much viable with any build. Not a very build restricted mid laner. Then we got Ra. Ra basically the worser version of Poseidon, where they're both kind of zoomy zoom boys. Except for Poseidon has been harder for people to basically get a hold of. With the help of his cripple and his knockback, he seems to have had, and the knock up as well, he seems to have more self-peel than the Ra. And while the Ra does have the heal for the team, which is nice, and while Ra can stop himself from being slowed, stopping yourself from being slowed doesn't matter when you're just, getting stunned all the time. So having a little bit more hard CC with the Poseidon, little bit more helpful for him. Then we got Raijin. Raijin also did pretty dang well up there in that platinum tier. Raijin has been doing, I would say, solidly good. He's been doing solidly good ever since they kind of changed the mid lane and it became the absolute danger zone and everybody was on the highway to the danger zone. Ever since then, he has become a lot more popular, a lot more just viable, and he's always kind of a safe pick. He's just kind of always a safe pick, Like, I don't really know what to play. I'm just gonna pick Raijin. He can dash away. I got CC me and low. What do you want from me? Then we've got Rama. Rama has his ups and downs. That's right. Ultimate jokes. But he falls right now right into the average tier. Kind of the worst version of Izanami right now. Situational through autos. Not as good of an escape skill. Not as good as a stim. Ultimate is arguably better at some things. But really, when you think about his kit in Izanami, Izanami does everything that Rama does, but basically better, including the 1v1 fight as well. As you get later into the team fights, Rama does tend to do pretty well, and he does like that first item Shadow Steel build where you get the crit online early and all kinds of stuff like that, but not great. Ratatasker just barely didn't make the upper echelon of gold tier. Just slightly into that under echelon. Did get played a lot. Seems to be a fairly popular pick, actually. And part of that comes down to the fact that he's been playing in 2 roles. He's been getting played a lot in jungle and support. Not doing well in the jungle on average, but is winning in the solo lane. For those of you guys that like Rat Solo, congratulations. He was actually positive over in the solo lane. For those of you that like Rat Jungle, he was negative in the jungle. So I tried. I play Ratatasker jungle. I go 20-1. I tried to bring him up. I tried to do it. I gave him my best shot. Then we've got Robin, who is seemingly always giving out his best shot. right up here in Diamond. Robin hits hard. He's like the ability-based jungler of ability-based junglers. He's got 4 damaging abilities. He's got multiple CC avoidances / immunities. He's got multiple forms of CC. He can get over walls. He's got damage mitigation. He's got a built-in shield. The dude's just a rock-solid kit all around. Huge base damage. And you factor on some extra CC, some cooldowns early with the Jotun's Wrath on top of that. Not to mention he's a hard counter pick for so many gods. Poseidon, hard counter pick. Scylla, hard counter pick. Cherry, hard counter pick. Izanami, hard counter pick. Anybody that has a big power ulti they want to drop on your noggin, hard counter pick. That's like half of the Smite God designs. It's like half of them. Then we've got Scylla still maintaining her reign of terror up at the top of the old mid lane list. Extremely popular pick. One of the most, maybe the most popular, no, not the most popular pick in the Smite Twitchy League, but certainly up there. Getting picked in 1 in every 4 games. 1 in every 4 games, a Scylla is popping up, almost always in the mid lane. She does have a couple of pickups elsewhere. It looks like she actually was technically played in every single role in the month of December, which is interesting, but obviously most of her success coming in that mid lane. Have you been polyprocced by a Scylla with a book build lately? It doesn't feel good if you're on the receiving end. You sat there because you were rooted and crippled and you couldn't move because you can't use your getaway skill and your beads aren't up because the root's on an 8-second cooldown. And then she polyprocced you and it hit you for 1,000 damage. And you died. You died. All right, next up we got Surcat. All right, somebody had to go join the lonely Hercules, and it's gonna be Surcat. Surcat had the worst elo in all of the STL for December, winning a whopping 14% of the games that she played in. And I think I can let that statistic go ahead and speak for itself. I think that's all you need to know. You don't need to be a genius at Smite to know that 14% is not enough games to be winning. Then we've got ourselves Set. Set did solidly okay. Set historically has always been a god that did really, really well when you put it in the hands of a top-end player, and in most other places was a little bit of a flat noodle. And so by the time that you average him out from those two areas, turns out he ends up right in the middle. Then we've got Scotty. Scotty also barely getting herself on the positive side of the average right there. So she is a hunter that doesn't like crit, is basically her problem. She's a power-based hunter in a crit-based hunter meta. It is an extremely long lane for her, and she doesn't have a real getaway skill. Honestly, she would probably do better in the mid lane, AMC style, than she would in the duo lane. Then we've got Sobek. Sobek getting himself a much better performance this month. Much more where I think he should be. Up there in that platinum tier, getting a solid bit of effort over in the support role. He actually took a bit of a hit over in the solo lane. He got a negative elo over in the solo lane. So he took a pretty big hit over there. Guardians, not solo laners. You know, I'll say it as many times as it needs to be said. But in the support role, had a fantastic job. Very aggressive, pairs really well with other super aggressive ADCs, particularly a god like Izanami or Cupid. Two different ways to go about it. Cupid, right for the fight. Izanami, clear wave, then right for the fight. Then we've got Sol. Sol did the best out of all of the kind of magical hunters in the month of December, particularly as a actual ADC. Chronos, Oleron did much better as mid laners, you know, than they did in the duo lane. Freya did solidly okay as an ADC. And Sol by far had the best performance over there as a hunter. She also did pretty well in the mid lane. She does have different style of builds that she can run. She's got a little bit more leeway than some of the others. But also very safe for the duo lane. CC Immune Ultimate plus Disapparate, one of the better getaway skills in the game, which means she does work in that longer lane compared to like an Oleron who doesn't have that same amount of getaway. Then we've got Wukong. Wukong did himself quite well, getting himself onto that platinum tier as well as a solo laner. Easy to proc Warrior's Axe on Wukong. I have Cudgel. You've been cudgeled. Pretty safe as well. Hard to go gank a Wukong. Like if you're a jungler and you see a Wukong in the solo lane, part of you goes, they'll be fine. They'll figure it out, right? Like he's gonna bull right through me, knock me up, get away. He's gonna ulti, CC immune, get all of his HP back. By the time he lands back down, he's got a bull for him again. You know, like I don't need that in my life. So he kind of just tends to sit over there and free farm. Susano did right there in the middle. Pretty difficult to play jungler, I would say. I would not put Susano as a easy character. When you get the Susano combo right, and when you get him going just a little bit early, if you can get like a quick kill in the mid lane, maybe you land your pull and they haven't quite hit level 2 yet in the mid lane, you go there really fast. I do think Susano has really good potential, especially with how good his ultimate is in the actual team fights themselves. But he's a bit of a shadow of the former god that he was in the past. A lot less of the 100-0 problem that he used to have inflicting upon the enemy gods. Then we've got, we're gonna do, how did she get herself over here? One sec. Tara, what are you doing over here? Did you get yourself all out of order? It's fine. Then we got Tara. Tara did not perform well. Tara really only came into the meta for a little bit because she had a giant bug that basically let her do 2 times damage. And then it got fixed. And she went back to normal again. And she wasn't great before it. So there you go, Tara. You got bug fixed, and in this case, your bug got squashed. For Sylvanas, he did all right. My man did solidly okay. He is a way of getting sustain on your team outside of the traditional healers. He doesn't provide as much healing as the Guan Yu's Hells of the world, but a little meditation plus a Sylvanas Wisp. You get a little Thebes going. You're giving out the protections with your Wisp and your Thebes. You're giving out some good protections to the team. Not too shabby. Not too shabby, man. Plus, he's got a pretty decent wave clear as well. Then we've got Thanatos. Thanatos doing solidly decent. In any league that encompasses all levels of gameplay, Thanatos usually does pretty good. Not usually at the top of the list, but also as you get a little bit. Thanatos is a really good, I would call, average god, in that he can be a little bit difficult to play with the scythe, but he's also a god that a lot of people like, whether it's his aesthetic or the idea of his kit or the healing or whatever. A lot of people start to play a lot of Thanatos and they get pretty good at him. And then they might be like shmeh at a lot of different gods, but like Thanatos is like their guy. It's kind of their jam. And they get really good at Thana because he snowballs early and you get to start so hard. And then all of a sudden you got 8 kills and it feels so good to play him. And so because, of course, this My Twitchy League encompasses all levels of gameplay, I think that we have a lot of Thanatos players in there that are quite good as well. And, of course, you get to the mid lane, level 2. You land that scythe. That's a dead mid laner. You did it. Wasn't that hard. You did the whole thing. Then we've got Morrigan. Morrigan also doing well right now. Combination of good lane clear, good abilities with the Polynomicon to go for the one shot at the end of the game. You basically get to do your inner Loki role play from stealth and one shot people. And also an underrated part of her kit, her ultimate is also dependent on other gods that are in the meta. So for example, a god like Camazotz is really good right now. Morrigan loves turning into Camazotz because of 2 reasons. 1, it's a great getaway skill for her to use to skadoodle right on out of the problem. And 2, you have to keep in mind the abilities that you level on Morrigan are the abilities you have leveled up on the god you turn into. And you level on Morrigan 4, 2, 1, 3. Which means that if a god's main ability is their 3, they tend to not be a very good god for you to turn into because you're not leveling it. Compared to a god like Camazotz, who now you've leveled up his main damaging and life-stealing ability. So you always have to keep that in mind on Morrigan. When gods that are in the meta have a better 2s and 1s, Morrigan tends to also like the meta more because she has to turn into them and she's not going to level her decoy to max first. Then we got Thor. Thor outperforming his Ratatasker counterpart just a little bit this month, although I would make the argument personally that Ratatasker is better than Thor, but my opinion means nothing here. I only look at the data. Thor and Ratatasker, very similar kits. They ulti in, they try to kill the target, and then hammer out or dash out. Either way, very similar. Both have been doing very shmeh in the meta at kind of all levels of gameplay. Then we've got Thoth. Thoth, very difficult character. Very difficult character to play. When he's played well and when he isn't taken out of the game early, Thoth damage is off the chain. Off the absolute chain. But he also has maybe more counter picks than any other god in the game. So if you can like get away with finding like a 4th, 5th pick mid, then you've got a fantastic opportunity. But if you're not, you're probably gonna get countered out the wazoo. Right out the wazoo. Then we've got Tiamat. Tiamat struggled. She struggled, man. Tiamat actually makes sense to be down here because she's really hard to play. She is objectively an extremely difficult god to play. I would argue that she's probably the hardest god in the game to play against. Or to play as. She has so many abilities to learn. She has so many combos. It's really hard to know when to use her stance switch. Her difficulty level is just so high. She reminds me a lot of old Persephone kit, where for like 98% of the player base, they hated playing her because she was so hard and they couldn't figure it out. And then like 2% of the player base was like, oh my God, it's so much fun. And once you get it figured out, Tiamat reminds me a lot of that. Then we've got Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi's a menace. The one thing about Tsukiyomi is that people tend to play him all over the place. He tends to get played in basically every role. And so that takes him down a little bit. People try to like rock the Tsukiyomi in solo lane. which he doesn't do so well in. But he does really well in the jungle, and he did really, really good as an ADC too, y'all. He did really good as an ADC. Like, really good. Like, why is he such a good ADC? Why are his autos so long and do so much damage? And he can 1v1 any hunter in the game. Don't let people know. Don't let them know. So if you want to run Suki outside of the jungle, you're taking it to the wrong side of the map. Don't play him in the soul lane. And then we've got Tyr. Tyr also not having a particularly healthy month as well. Definitely losing more games. Only a 33% win rate for the poor Tyr boy. Really got wrecked over in the solo lane. He really got wrecked. His actual lane presence was fine, but once he left the lane and had to participate in the team fights, way less participation in the fights than a lot of the other gods. Woojer solidly did decent. Woojer, another very difficult god to play. Land axe and combo, congratulations. Miss axe, you're barely a god at this point. And so Woojer has a very high difficulty level associated with him as well. Compared to some other gods. Also, Cupid, easy counter to Woojer. And Cupid is doing so well right now. Izanami can tend to clear the wave long before Woojer and then force the fight. She can also do really well into him. So also some of the hunters that can do well against him tend to be doing well. Oh, we're getting close to the end of the list. Then we got Vimana. Believe it or not, Vimana did not do well. I love Vimana. I think he's got a fun kit, even though it's really simple. But Vimana's kit is simple. It's just an old Smite kit. You know a kit is old when you go to read an ability and it says, this ability does damage in a cone. And you go, okay, but like, does it like cripple them or like knock them up, or does it give me like bonus protections? Like, what is it? It's damage in a cone. It's vanilla. Then we got Vulcan. I'm surprised Vulcan even got himself here, but Vulcan, same kind of problems as a lot of the other gods in the realm of Hera. Has to walk up to the wave to clear it. Walking up to the wave to clear it in this meta is just simply a no-go. You can't walk directly up to the melees in order to hit them with your full ability clear, because the support's going to be there, the jungle's going to be there. You're going to get collapsed on. You don't have a real getaway skill. You can't really get away with that in this meta, but Vulcan does have the passive movement speed. Every time that you hit an ability, he gets that going for him, and then he does have a knock-up for self-peel as well. So as long as you're not against somebody with a knock-up immunity, you at least have a little bit of a chance. Then we got Shibalange. Shibalange got himself up into platinum. Shibalange is really, really good when he's not getting hard countered. He is a strong hunter ever since his buff. He loves crit because he's got sky high power and damage in his build with the passive plus the bolas. You just got a lot of raw auto attack damage. Obviously, with the Smite Twitchy League being a bunch of people playing competitively, it also means people are in comms working together. The higher the comms, the more you're talking in team fights, the more disruptive Shibalange gets, which means that it's really efficient inside of a team fight in the STL. But if they pick Cupid, you will cry for the rest of the game straight, because you do not have the immunity to stop his ult. If they pick Fenrir, you will cry for the rest of the game, because he will brutalize you and you will go, I do not feel good. But outside of counter picks, Shibalange does fantastic. He just has some hard counter picks. You gotta be careful. Then we got Jing Chen. Jing Chen just not quite finding himself on the upper echelon of that gold tier. Just fell down a little bit below. His problem, once again, Xingqian is a competent support. He is a competent support. But people really want to play him in the solo lane. They really, really want to play him in the solo lane. And as we've mentioned probably 7 times, Guardians, not solo laners right now. And so that always hurts him. People want to play him in solo. You should probably actually just be playing him as a support right now. Then we got Yamoja. Hey, do you want to guess how good Yamoja was? She's real good. Yamoja is a strong character. Turns out having immense lane clear with immense amounts of CC on the same ability allow you to really snowball through the early game. And then you get the transition into the late stages of the game where you have giant walls that block off everybody in the lane. Then you've got extra walls on top of that with your 3 that continue to block up the opponent. And if that wasn't enough for you, thank God you got heals and shields. Oh my. Did I mention that you can heal with your auto attack too? Pretty much everything you could ever want in a support kit. They could basically tune her damage down to 0 and she would still have a cool kit. It would still be cool. Then we got ourselves a little bit of Ymir. Then we've got ourselves a little bit of Ymir action. He managed to do pretty dang well for himself, getting himself up to that platinum tier almost entirely as a support. Believe it or not, all of the games that he played in solo, he went negative on in solo lane because Guardians are not solos right now. But they make for great supports, and having that Ymir wall as a support is quite nice. You know? Then we've got Zeus. Zeus did okay. Zeus is still kind of in this in-between zone. They gave him some movement on his shield, which is nice. He's got great lane clear. Still very susceptible. Still very susceptible to ganks. Very susceptible to being walled off. Has a lot of damage. Could really use a hot support paired with him. You get a Geb or a Khepri support paired with a Zeus, now you're talking. Now you're getting some mojo going. But left to his own devices, gets kind of lonely out there. And finally, we got Zhong Kui, who got himself up into that platinum tier. Zhong Kui has to walk up to the wave to clear it, but a little bit of an exception to the rule, kind of like Morgan, because he's more than just a mage. He is quite tanky, so particularly in the early stages of the game when you're most likely to get ganked, he's got those bonus protections, and those protections make him really hard to kill early. Plus, of course, he has a lot of sustain as well, just with his 1-2 combo, guys. And that is the official Smite Twitchy League tier list for the month of December. With all of the data that we gathered, these are all of the Smite gods in order of how they performed within the average of the player base. Within the average of the player base, these are the gods that performed the best at all levels or worst at all levels, from Izanami and Yamoja at the top, crushing it, all the way down bottom, where poor Hercules and Serket just had a really hard time finding their wins, guys. Had a really hard time finding their wins. And of course, on average, most of the gods right there in the middle did pretty much decent, as you would expect. And that is our full tier list for December. Holy cow. Tier lists take a hot minute, don't they? Thank you for supporting the Twitchiest community. If you'd like to see more videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and always hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Thank you for all your support and have a twitching day, y'all.